All right, we are here for the Chris Gray Show with Christine Bullen, who I just consider the head honcho at UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade. I'm sure that's what's
And
on
I
your business card.
and I pass my business cards out all the time. You know how
Yeah,
business cards are in LA. We're passing them out nonstop, and it does. It says exactly that. It's head honcho, and
yeah. I
that's what I
mean, comedians
request.
have to
Yeah,
have business cards. That's the main thing. It's just you got
for
to get a
sure.
business
How
card.
else would we get auditions?
That's
It has
right.
to be from the business card. Do you know what's amazing though? What is amazing is when I first started, like right out of college, I did think that you needed things like that. I mean,
So did
even
I.
like we don't
Yes.
even use headshots, but like I literally like when I got my first batch of headshots, I did get little business cards with a little picture on it that just said my name
Like a
and my
real estate
email,
agent.
basically. And I think it just said like actor, like
Yeah, yeah.
hold up. And I probably like sent him out to people. Like, ugh, so
Because they wouldn't
embarrassing.
take you seriously as an actor without the business card. That's the thing.
No, and boy did they. They sure took me seriously when I was 22 coming out of college thinking I was, going to make it in a
Right.
year.
So I read that you went to Cornell.
I
Um,
did.
and did you do theater there?
I did. Yeah. I went to Cornell and that first, month of school, I sort of, jumped into all of the opportunities that a school has and I like auditioned for the play and I got in the main stage show and then that was it. Like you realize like in high school you can do so many things because they all take like a day or two a week, but in college
Hmm.
it was like, "Oh cool, you're in the main stage show. It's 4 hours a night, 6 nights a week." Like it
Right.
was like, "What?" So I sort of just like became a theater person, and then I
Gotcha.
majored in theater at Cornell.
Okay. Cool. Of course, Cornell is a famous, prestigious school. I remember thinking, I don't know if why, I remember thinking that Cornell was like where you go if you want to work at a hotel.
Well,
Like,
you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. They have a very very well known hotel school. There's a hotel on campus, and the hotel school, which is one of seven colleges at Cornell, yeah, they like train people how to basically like run hospitality businesses. So like it
wow,
is a very very good hotel school.
hotel school. And so, I mean, and so like this is the shallowness of my knowledge of places, which I think has been made worse by being an improv comedian because all I need is like three references
Totally.
to make somebody that went to school in Ithaca laugh. So it would be hotel school, and then it would be Moosewood Cafe would be the other one I would say.
Wow. I can't believe you know that. How do you know that? I had
I
like
only
a
know that
birthday
because
there.
way back in the day, Moosewood Cafe put out a cookbook that was
Yes, they did.
quite famous as being one of the first like mainstream vegetarian cookbooks, I believe.
Yes.
Um,
Wow. That's amazing that you know that. Yes. And you can go to their little restaurant. Their cookbooks are all over the place. And it's downtown Ithaca.
yeah.
You know,
Uh,
those are two good facts, you know.
that's
That
it.
would make me laugh in a show.
I don't have a third. I would make up a third that didn't
Okay,
make
I'll give
sense.
you a third. A third is that all there's these shirts that say Ithaca is gorgeous.
Okay,
And everyone
yes.
wears those. And they're
Wait,
green
you
and the
wear them
letters are white.
in Ithaca? Like I, for some reason, I thought, because like in,
People do. I
well,
think as college students you do, or maybe I was such a loser but no, I definitely
and all
know
your
that people
friends.
did. But it's funny because that's one of those things that you shouldn't wear when you're in the
In the
city that
city,
you're
yes.
but I'm literally wearing an Altadena hat right now. So I'm sort of
Correct.
shooting myself in the foot in this conversation.
Well, I was
Because
gonna
I've just
say,
always done that.
because sometimes I've only bought shirts that say Los Angeles when I'm at the Edinburgh Fringe
Totally.
because I like to buy uh t-shirts from UK outlets where they'll say like Los Angeles County track team or something like where it's just not, it doesn't
Yeah,
seem right.
yeah, just super generic. You're like, this
Uh,
is my shirt. Yeah.
so by the way, you're wearing an Altadena hat, but you're not currently in Altadena.
I am not at Altadena. Altadena burned to the ground unless people are unaware of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We actually live just south of Altadena in North Pasadena, but yeah, my daughter's school was in Altadena and burned down, and all of our whole community. It's crazy because my mom came out here to visit like a couple years ago and moved into this house, and she was like, "Are you ever worried about fires?" And I was like, "Mom, it would literally have to burn an entire town to get to our house." And it did. Like
Yeah.
it's a block away from us. It stopped a block away from us. So yeah, pretty weird, weird way to start the year. And
Well, I was going to
it's
ask
also so
you,
odd. Go ahead.
this might be a weird angle, but I feel like the fires in Los Angeles have affected everybody. I mean, obviously some people more than others, but have you seen it in a way affect the comedy world in terms of resources or availability or just people's mindsets?
I mean, in that first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I would say like January, I think people were all over the place, like watching programming, which I was doing very, kind of from afar because I was, yeah, I had escaped my home with my two toddlers. So like, we're canceling shows that week, of course, just kind of based on the experience people were having and whether or not anyone wanted to do a show, and kind of erring on the side of, comfort for the performers themselves. And but once we brought shows back, maybe a week later or something, maybe it was that Sunday, I think it was surprising. Some shows like packed way more than they ever would have in the, otherwise, because I think people were very, very eager to be in a place with other people and
Mm-hmm.
recognize that like there's still a lot here and we're not alone and all that stuff. And then of course some were empty because you have people, cast members who are, displaced or lost their homes and stuff. So I think that first couple of weeks was just really, really bizarre. We did a bunch of fundraiser shows as well. I mean, I think if anything, it definitely showed that like the people who want to be here really want to support each other and want to build a community. And it's interesting because like I'm so deeply connected to, my little town and how this personally affected me. But and obviously many people were affected so much worse than me, like my house didn't burn out. We just can't live there right now. And
Still
and
pretty
then I
bad, Christine.
still not fun. It's not fun to leave. It was funny because my husband was like, we had like 10 minutes. We, grabbed our kids and grabbed a couple things. And he was like, we should pack like we're not coming back. And even then, like even seeing the flames from my backyard, I was like, I mean, we'll be back in the morning. Like I just like couldn't
Mm-hmm.
fathom that like this would, be what it was, because it was just so inconceivable, I think. And the crazy thing is like I haven't even, I mean, I've thought about it, but it's like the Palisades alone would have been the most devastating thing to
Mm-hmm.
have happened to LA, or Altadena alone. And the fact that like these two things happened at the same time, it is like, and just surrounded the entire city, So when I'm talking to people who aren't as closely connected, I ask that question too of like, you're feeling like this is crazy too, right? It's not just like the people who, were more directly affected. It feels like a truly kind of mind bending, like inconceivable experience that we've all gone through here.
Yeah, and I've been heartened over not just this time, but many times I've been very pleased to see how kind of resilient the UCB community is. You know, rewinding back to the pandemic, another fun time. Uh,
Super fun.
uh, I think some people thought that UCB wasn't even going to make it out of the pandemic. It wasn't going to exist, you know.
I was one of those people, and I was one of four people who were employed by the company during that time. So
Yeah.
I mean, I have one reference that like I was, the theater obviously closed entirely for almost, well, I guess, yeah, a little over 2 years. And in the middle of that, I was with a couple other people who were just kind of wearing any hat to keep the heartbeat alive in hopes that either it would reopen in a different way, which would have been probably as a nonprofit, or that, something would happen that did, which is that there would be a sale that would kind of keep it viable. And there was a time when I was like working on I think I was coaching a friend's SNL set, and we went to Franklin because I had keys to Franklin, and we went to the stage to just be on a stage to rehearse it. It was covered in boxes and stuff. And it was like a Friday night at 7 o'clock. I remember looking at the red clock on the back, and I was like, wow, this is a Friday. Like there would have been 300 people that cycled through here on this night. And it's just the two of us sitting on with boxes around us. And it was like this kind of devastating feeling of just like the weight of like what this place has historically meant to people and the community that depend on it and care about it and keep it alive and fuel it, um, on a weekend night that like would have been just buzzing. And I remember very distinctly like on opening night, like hosting the show and looking up at that clock and being like, all right, we're here. Like we we did make it through that very intense
Hmm.
moment. And a lot of theaters obviously closed for good, and I'm really happy for sure that UCB was able to figure out a way to, reopen.
When did you start at UCB?
I started,
I mean,
well, I mean,
in an employed fashion. Yeah.
yeah, performing for years in New York, and then moved out to LA, and then I was teaching, and then became the artistic director in the fall of 2019. So I only did the
Oh,
job for 6 months.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Good timing. Good timing.
just long enough to
Uh,
know kind of what it was, and that it would never be the same,
yeah.
which was also very good in a lot of ways. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a time where we were able to, hopefully address a lot of the things that made UCB a space that was not equitable and not, performer friendly in a lot of ways, and there was a barrier of entry that was, really unfair for a lot of people. And so it was good that in this reopening there was a way to address a lot of those things. And I mean, there's still plenty of things that need work, for sure, but there were some changes that had to be made, and I think it was probably the only way, in a sense, that they could have been made was like an entire shutdown.
Right. It could like a reset of the culture where
Yeah.
you sort of get to rebuild from like you only need to carry forth the parts of it that you want to keep.
Yes.
Um,
I mean, that was
so
that was the goal. Yeah.
so rewinding back to coming out of the pandemic. So going into it, UCB was owned by the UCB4, and just correct me if I'm wrong about any of these facts, but it was owned by Amy Poehler, Matt Walsh, Matt Besser, and Ian Roberts. Uh, I almost said Ian, the guy who wrote James Bond. Ian Fleming.
He was involved, but he just, not as much as he needed to be. Yeah.
So going into they were the ones that owned it, and then I think near the end of pandemic maybe, or I can't really remember, but like they were sold. UCB was
Yes.
sold. And I would
Yeah.
say
Within a few years. Yeah.
if you, and I think around this time there was also there's a lot of discussion about equity and performers getting paid, and also there was like an independent committee, right, that came up to advocate for diversity and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
Project Rethink. Is that what you're
yeah.
referencing
Yes.
potentially? Yeah.
Yes.
So there was a group of people that came together, I mean, out of the Black Lives Matter movement in June of 2020 that, kind of stipulated a lot of things that they wanted to see change about UCB if it were ever to reopen. And at the time, those were addressed really to like the owners, and there were only 4 employees, but like essentially like what is left of UCB, this is what would need to change. And when the company was sold, that was one of the pieces that was like most important, I think, in that conversation of reopening, is like the UCB4 knew how important this was, and that it wouldn't really be viable if UCB didn't address these things. And so they passed that information on to the new owners, and the new owners had to take it very seriously. Otherwise, I don't think people would have rallied and come back.
Yeah. So I think if you asked sort of the mood of what people thought UCB was going to be around the time of that sale, I think that the most cynical, pessimistic views would have been these pushes for equity are going to fall on deaf ears. The pushes for performers to get paid are things we're going to talk about, but are never actually going to happen. And private equity is going to turn UCB into like ASCAT sponsored by crypto dot whatever, and that somehow it would be like sort of a zombie version of itself before. And I think people were skeptical about even audiences coming back
For sure.
to the space. And I think along with that, there was a little bit of a feeling of like, UCB shows are for lots of different kinds of audiences, but over the years has often been driven by people in their 20s and early 30s. And these are the people that are going to be the most cynical about, I don't remember what all the other companies that the other company owns. So it was like they own the Dodgers or
The
something.
Dodgers, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
And
big one.
so, because of that, it's not going to be, a place for me kind of thing. And then I remember maybe only a month or two into the relaunch, I remember just being uh like walking outside and seeing the line down Franklin, and the vibe of similar to what you were describing in terms of the shows last month, about people just wanting to be in a space together, wanting to see comedy again. And from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for other people, but like, I think the vibe is great there, and the performers are getting paid. And I also think for me, it's good for comedy that we have, um, maybe this will sound just, I'll take all the flack for this. That maybe this sounds cold in a culture that's concerned with inflation and stuff like that. But for me, I think it's good that shows are no longer like free or $5. I mean, there are shows that you can see in LA
Yes.
that are free or $5, but I think it's also not bad to educate audiences to say, hey, maybe we should pay a little more for these shows because we also want to pay the performers. I mean, I assume they're linked. But anyway,
Yes,
can you
they
talk
are
about
linked.
what that was like to go through that? And did you feel that pessimism when the launch was happening again?
You know, I mean, I think my emotions around it, ran the gamut. Like had, I was, it was a real challenge to figure out how to pay performers at UCB. And just because, what made UCB special, I think, was that, and what was a huge part of it was like, this is comedy for all. It's accessible for everyone. And that's why there were $5 shows. And of course, like before the pandemic, there were plenty of shows that were edging up to 15, but I don't think there were any shows that were even 20 at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like plenty of shows, house team shows were still $5. And when you talk about paying performers and paying coaches and directors, which is a huge cost, it is a
Mm-hmm.
huge cost to pay the coaches and directors and pay the performers. Like there's just absolutely no model to do it if you're not raising the prices of tickets. And the whole goal of the theater is just to break even. That's it. It's only really ever been that. Obviously, like, I think there would be a hope that it could be more at some point, especially now that live streaming is coming into play. But yeah, it was a real kind of puzzle to figure out like how we can do this and honor the paying of performers, and keep the place viable. So raising tickets was a must, but ticket prices. But I also agree with you that like I think people should understand that like the work that goes into this is worth being paid, for these performers and this talent to be paid. And you're looking at other theaters around town and they're charging more still than UCB for a lot of like primetime weekend shows. I think mostly, like Groundlings is 25 or 30, and we're still, trying to stay a little more accessible for people around that 20 mark for some of our weekend shows. And so, for me, I was always trying to kind of thread that needle of like making sure that we are able to find a way to pay performers and also keep this a place where like it is accessible. So a big piece of it was making sure that it used to be as a student, you would get you get to see two shows for free within the course of the, 8 weeks that you're in a class, for instance. And now all shows are free for students because we have to be giving that to people when you're paying this much for
Mm-hmm.
class. You should be able to get into shows for free, pending space. But that's a cool perk. Like I think back to when I was a student, like if I was really interested in trying to learn as much as I can and gain as much experience and insight into kind of the whole UCB world or comedy in general and live performance, like if I know that for those 8 weeks I can get into any show, pretty much any show for free, like that's worth the cost of the class almost,
Yeah.
just to be able to actually go see so many shows. And of course for performers, it's like, okay, cool. Like we've sold all the tickets we're going to sell. And now there's people who want to sit in these seats and laugh. Like, yes, please, please
Mm-hmm.
open these shows up for free. So that was a huge part of it too, is just making sure that like it still is a place that is possible, that is accessible for people who, don't have $25 to shell out for, every show that they want to see at UCB. So it was, yeah, it was definitely challenging. And I think, yeah, paying directors and coaches was a big piece of it too, which was also challenging because, you're having to change the recoupment for those shows and make sure that we're able to sort of accommodate the pay of those directors and coaches, which used to come out of, as our pockets. We would all
Mm-hmm.
Venmo, your $20 a month or whatever it was to your director.
But you have to make a joke in the Venmo when you send it.
Yeah, for sure. And it better be good because everyone else on your team is making a joke too. And you're just fighting for comedy, cachet here. So, yeah. But I'm very I am very proud that we were able to figure that out. And you know, we're still a theater now that's kind of trying to thread that needle. And I think that it's like, you know, for some of the bigger shows, like where, you know, performers are potentially used to making a lot more money for a sellout show, they don't make as much at UCB. But like we are still able to pay the shows that like only barely meet recoupment. And even if it's like everyone on the show gets the $5, you know, like split from that show, at least like you're honoring the fact that these people are doing work and they are being compensated based on, you know, the profits of the show. So
Yeah, but
it was
also
yeah.
on the days that five of your teammates call in sick and you still sell out, and it's you and one other person during the show, you make a pretty good thing for the
Make a little
night.
more money. I know. I mean, I
um,
think back to the time when I was performing, I was like, you're always paying to perform in some way. Cause like for me, I was mostly sketch and character. So I'm buying props, I'm schlepping a, you know, like
yeah.
suitcase around New York. So like the fact that you could get any money, like I remember the first show I got paid for, which was in during the pandemic, like, you know, significantly paid for at Dynasty. And I was like, blown away that you could make that
Hmm.
much. And it was a solo show, so like I was the only, but it was still just like mind blowing. And it's so exciting as a, you know, performer of live comedy to know that like that's possible now, you know, even if it's
Yeah,
not a
and
ton of money. It's yeah.
I just think that we were in this position. I forget what year it was, probably 2017 or whatever. I mean, it's come up a few times, but the year that like Kurt Metzger was like, "What? Like stand-ups are used to getting paid. Why don't improv?" And around that time, um, I was just starting to date who is now my husband, Eric, and I remember saying, um, it was a Thursday night, and I said, "Well, I've got five shows in the next 4 days." And he, you know, as we were ending the phone call because we were dating long distance, and he said, "Well, go get that money." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna make. I'll be making $0 for these five shows." And he was stunned, like he couldn't
Yeah.
believe that we were all donating our labor. And around that time, I would, and I will chalk this up to the old leadership. There was a significant pushback to the even the concept that the performers could get paid. And I remember one argument back then was, well, we can't make a 1099 for everybody or whatever it was. It was just like we can't. It's too many freelancers. We can't do it. It's just like that's
Yeah.
the reason.
That's the
That's
reason. Yeah.
please don't say that in public. That's not a good. That's just you, it makes you seem like an asshole, to be honest.
For sure. For sure.
um,
There was and then there has been a way to figure that out even when there's 30 performers in a show. It's like, yeah, you can figure out how to pay those people and once they're in the system, it's a lot easier for the next show, you know?
yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
also I found it interesting back then the way there was and I think this is probably true in many communities, and there are probably elements of it that are still true in, let's just say, Los Angeles comedy, where as a group people have just sort of believed, well, we should do this for free because X, Y, and Z. And any sort of like challenging of that is, even though there's all these other arts industries around us where
Yeah.
people get paid for not similar, but like, you know, maybe similar audience demographics or similar venue sizes where they would
Sure.
never do it for free.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it's interesting that it took sort of a complete reboot to uh, sort of work it, to start from scratch and like work it all over again. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it always felt like such a privilege, like to get to perform, to get on a team, to get an opportunity, to get a run of a show, and so that was the pay, is just the privilege. And I think both things can be true. You can experience
yeah,
the honor and the privilege of getting to do it because it's hard to get onto a team or get a run of a show, and also get paid to do that, you know. And again, like not going to be a ton at this theater that seats 110 people, but and tries to keep ticket prices at least accessible, but it is you know, it's a token of like the work that we're doing and just the appreciation that it is work too, you know.
I think that's a reflection also of show business in particular, but I think this is probably true for any industry, but show business in particular, there's always these shifting power dynamics of, oh, who needs this more? You know, I'm a student, I need the stage time. So I do view it as a privilege if I get when
Right.
I get to do my class show and I'm going to do that jam. And then at some point people start to be like, wait, I'm a draw. Like, for me to
Yeah.
do this show means I bring tickets, and then, and there's all
Yes.
this weird, everybody's on a spectrum, and often people are a mix of both, depending on even the show or the night
Yep.
or the time and all that stuff. And so,
Or the theater, the venue, or yeah, exactly. What the show is. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so how hands-on are your bosses? Do they see shows? Do they talk to you about the comedy or?
Yes. There's two bosses. One is a manager that lives here in LA and runs Mosaic, Jimmy Miller, and he is, has been working in comedy and representing some of the best comedic talent in the industry for a very, very long time. So he cares a lot about the art form and definitely cares about the quality of the show. And my other boss lives in Chicago, so he's not seeing shows in person as often, but also certainly cares about the quality of the show, I would say. And so they I'm grateful that they care. They definitely care. And I also think like they've given me freedom to move forward in the ways that they might not know how to influence because they're not connected or didn't, have an experience at UCB before buying the company. So yeah, I've definitely been grateful to have autonomy, but also, believe that like they do care about the comedy. They do want this to succeed for the sake of, the talent, in addition to obviously making this business venture work, which of course is a part of it. And that they both have, I think a good sense of what's funny and care about what's funny. So yeah, I'm grateful for the autonomy that I've been given.
Yeah, and I mean, in a really general way, like, is it working? Like, are things, are there challenges right now, or is it, how are you satisfied with where you've brought the theater?
In many ways I am, and I think no matter what circumstance you're in as an artistic director of this theater and maybe any theater, like there are going to be challenges that are in some ways, impossible to surmount at certain times. And I like I said, I'm certainly grateful for the owners for a lot of reasons, and I, just like I think any AD in the before times, there's certainly things that can be frustrating about this role. And not only because like there's just a limited resource, like there's a very, very limited resource. And it feels more limited now than it did even before. Though like we're obviously creating a lot more space and more opportunity for people. But it will always have been and will continue to be forever for anyone doing this job, I think, a challenging role because there are so many people that want the same thing and there's just a limited amount of it to give out, even for a lot of talented people. I mean, you look at auditions itself and it's like, you get 700 or 800 people auditioning for Herald Night and there's maybe 30 slots. And I
Hmm.
mean, it's so cliche because we've all heard this as performers, but like, it's not that it's not you. It's not that you've done something wrong necessarily. It's just there are limited spaces and there's only
Hmm.
so many people that can get those. So it is, of course, hard, and it's hard to end shows that have been running, and it's hard to tell people that they don't get to do the thing that they've loved to do. And it was a huge part of the reopening was, telling a lot of people who had very good weekly slots at UCB for years and years that they wouldn't have that anymore, and not a fun thing to do if you can
Hmm.
imagine, but was obviously very necessary too. And I think now that we've been open for a few years, I'm trying to kind of find the balance of all of it and be able to offer more opportunity to the people who, are, like you said, like really true draws and are going to sell out a house and like for good reason, not just because they're a famous person, but because
Hmm.
they're very, very talented. And ideally, like they've come up through UCB. And so they are a UCB homegrown improviser or talent and they sell a show. And so trying to find, ways to balance that and offer more opportunity to that and still, maintain a certain number of programming slots for people that are literally on the other side of it, like the beginning of it, and trying to explore and take big risks and fail big. And that's really what we continue to try to do in those sort of later slots, the weeknight slots, like really try to give opportunities to people who like are early and could be, that person in 5 years, but have to develop and have to fail a lot in order to get to that place and find their talent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They could be the Abby and Alana that never got on a Herald team.
Exactly.
And then they
And
made Broad
everyone
City.
loves that story.
Everyone loves that story.
They do.
Well, also, I think a lot of the teams that had weekly shows that then became monthly shows, I think a lot of the players on those teams, frankly, I think a lot of them ended up being 30, 40, and 50 years old, many of them with children that are now just like, yeah, monthly's fine.
Totally.
um,
Totally. Yes. I think
and
many people sort of said that out of the pandemic. Also, we were conditioned during the pandemic to not go out as much. And like
mhm,
for me, I think I was right at that age where like and I was pregnant at the beginning of the pandemic and now I have two kids. So like my life changed completely and it was the time in my life when it would have changed, I think. But like a lot of people I think kind of grew up and got past the like I can do show just like you said the next 4 nights in a row. I can do shows and not get paid. I think we many of us at that somewhere in that age range probably got to a point where we were like, yeah, I don't know if I have that in me, and that's probably okay.
that's
you
probably,
know
I think that's probably okay. And I also think some of us, um, maybe had a tendency to get a little too comfortable in the I've got a show every week, and I think maybe I think we were ready to expand our careers beyond having a weekly
UCB.
improv show.
Yes.
Um,
Totally. I think it did that for a lot of people too. And for sure, a lot of places found other venues to perform in addition to UCB, in addition to a monthly slot. But I think for a lot of people, it probably did encourage them to like get out of the comfort zone of like, I've got this thing and it's a good thing at UCB and maybe become almost lazy in a sense of like, but I've got that thing, like
yeah,
I'm good as long as I have that show. And then when it
yeah,
got,
and there is a
shake
prestige
it up.
in being part of a regular show at UCB, and there's, I mean,
For sure.
I listen. I love being on the talent page on the website. I was not aware until I met younger performers that for some people that's a huge deal to get onto the talent page
Yeah.
on the website. And I think that uh, that I think that's incredible at the beginning of your journey, but like there can be a point later where it's like I've got this weekly show, it sells out every time, I don't have to promote it at all because UCB just like our show just does great. I'm on the talent page every once in a while. I'll get an email about auditioning for something because I'm on that page. And that could be the sort of bedrock that you sort of spend 6 years just
Trying to
doing
get.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and also you had to also make some choices because you had fewer spots because you also lost Sunset,
A theater.
the second
Yeah.
video venue on Sunset, which was a like, and I guess you also lost the extra space as well. Um,
The inner sanctum.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think you'll ever go back to another like? Do you think there'll be another space at some point? Is that ever discussed?
Well, we do now have a small sort of annex space on the block, which is like right around the corner in that shopping center where we now have two classrooms and like a smaller stage. We call it the annex, and it could probably seat, 60 people. And it's a really cool space to perform because it feels like very intimate and it's got a really good vibe, I think. And, it's like part of the training center. So it is nice to kind of have almost like a campus on the block because now you've got a couple classrooms upstairs in the theater and then right around the block. So that is, primarily student programming. There's like a Herald Thursdays where the Herald teams get to perform, another time with like a smaller house and kind of do a little more experimental stuff. But yeah, we've got different kind of like jams and sketch crams and all kinds of stuff that kind of plays there. And then it's also just an opportunity for me to kind of have a flex space to put something up that like might not be quite ready for Franklin or might not I know probably won't sell at Franklin, but definitely deserves an opportunity to, to get up in front of people and to sell tickets. So it's nice to have that. I would compare that to the Inner Sanctum. It's a much smaller space than the Sanctum was.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the kind of programming we're aiming for, it's similar, which is just a little more like community-based, student-based, experimental jam vibes. I don't know if there'll be another theater in LA. We just reopened the New York theater, or I should say, opened a new space right off of 14th Street that opened in the fall of 2024, and so that was really the big push was, and that was always the goal of the new owners when they bought the place, was to reopen LA first because it was the theater that was still, that we still had.
Hmm.
And then to find a new space and reopen a space in New York, just to bring us back to what it was before, which is these two coasts, these two cities. And I think yeah, there's definitely talk of opening other theaters in other cities, but I don't know if there would be more in use in LA or more in New York before maybe another city.
So I just saw you have some Herald auditions coming up, right?
We do, end of March, so in a month,
Okay.
yeah.
So, I just finished my last class. I've signed up for Herald auditions. I haven't actually.
No, I know.
I've I've actually only taken through 301, I think. I got to get back in, do 301.
You're not eligible for Herald. You do play on ASCAP, but you're not eligible
I'm
to
not
audition for
eligible for
Herald.
Herald. Um, uh, I just graduated. I want to go audition. I recognize it's just because of the numbers, but also I'm fresh out of class. I'm not. I don't consider it like it's a shoe in. I'll get on a team. How should I approach this first Herald audition that I'm going on from your perspective?
It's a great question. It's funny because I actually didn't do the Herald track either. I did take the classes, but I came up through the sketch character world, so I never did the Herald audition. And to me, it's like one of the most terrifying auditions. Like when I watch it, I'm just like, God, I can't believe like you can prepare so much and it's all, like it's all just
Right.
what you say when you step out and who you happen to step out with. I mean, obviously it's so much more than that. It is the work that has gone into it for years to learn this very specific art form, but it is super terrifying because, for me, it's always like, do I know my lines? Great. Good. At least I have that.
Right.
So I think like for anyone who's just finished their class and this is their first audition, as cliche as it might sound, I would say just really try to enjoy it and really try to enjoy yourself, because the reality is the chance of getting on a team is very, very slim. And the freer you can be with your skill that you've just learned, the more fun you're going to have in the room, and probably the better shot of at least getting a callback. So
Hmm.
like it does sound super cliche, but you have to know how to how to initiate. You have to know how to pull from premise. You have to know obviously what this audition entails, and you should and would, if you have graduated from the program and taken 401, especially recently, it should be pretty fresh. But as silly as it sounds, like the freer you can kind of be with it, I think that will permeate the space in a very beneficial way for anyone who comes into that room. And like another super cliche thing to say, but like everyone wants you to do well. Like we
Yeah,
are
yeah,
all in
yeah.
there just like, God, we just want you to have fun and enjoy
Well,
it.
and
And,
also like not only do you in a beneficent way want people to do well, you also just don't want to be bored. you
right.
know, you know,
It's a
you've
lot of improv. It's
you've
a
watched a
lot of
lot of
improv. It's like
improv. I mean,
5 days.
I've been on the team that the casts a couple times at like a theater before. I imagine there's also discussion of, you know, it's not just based on that one day's audition, right? It's probably based on teacher input, or you get to know people, and people have champions, and in the
You know,
discussions.
it's been actually a pretty contentious subject coming back from in the reopening, and there really has been a very concerted effort for it to be the audition,
Oh,
at
cool.
least for the first 2 years that we've done it, because it is very unfair if someone happened to take a class with one of the people who happens to be on the committee and you happen to
Mm,
have been good friends with them, and like, there's a piece there that's just yeah, that could be very unfair for someone who is a great improviser but like didn't take class with someone who's in that room. And so we really do try to base it on the audition for sure. I think where the other piece comes into play is we're in callbacks and we have 50 headshots on the table and there's room for 25. That's when we would potentially look at class grades and kind of look back at some of the performance stuff leading up to that. But the audition is what gets you on the team for sure. Like that is what we are, weighing in that.
um, and then when people get on a Herald team, I feel like they sometimes still feel like they are not necessarily auditioning, but they're still being evaluated, right? The question I had sometimes when I see a Herald show or I talk to people on, especially newer players on these teams, is I wonder, do you see people sometimes feeling a little restricted either? Sometimes I feel like I see performers that feel constricted, either
Hmm.
by the herald structures that they feel that they need to fulfill, or
Hmm.
maybe they feel restricted by feeling evaluated by like, I better do well in these next couple months so that I can continue to be on a team, kind of thing. And of course, from my perspective, I'm like, you're going to do the best if you allow yourself to sort of throw those things away. But it's easy for me to say because I'm
It's
not on the
so
team.
easy to say. It's literally, it's the same as me being like, just don't care about the audition and you'll probably do a lot better. Like, what
Yeah.
an easy thing to say.
Yeah.
And of course, I know from experience, and probably you do too, that the auditions maybe you've had the most success with are auditions where like for me, it's like where I was super late and I just like knew I wasn't going to get it. And then I get the screen test,
I
because
mean,
like
one of the
I
first commercials I ever
knew.
booked,
Yeah.
one of the first commercials I ever booked was where I couldn't make the callback. And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't go in for a second time to ruin the first audition I did.
Exactly. Right. You get so pumped up for that callback.
I mean, do you see
But
that, or am I like, is that a thing or not?
for sure. I mean, I think the trajectory that I've seen is like the opening night show is always such a blast. And even if it's not good, like technically good, it is so much fun. And I think most performers, unless there's a real slip up, like feel so good after that first night because it's just the energy in that room is really, really positive. And there's so many friends in that audience for people who, may have auditioned for years. And so I think maybe those first like few shows are pretty exciting and pretty fun. And then there's definitely a dip, I would say, for performers who are new to a team in terms of like, getting into a groove and learning how to avoid some of the missteps, but like, those first few shows it's so fun. So you probably don't see as much of it, but yeah, I think there are some performers that just have the ability to kind of treat it as a really fun experience. And I think there are certainly people who just get really wrapped up in like, what will this mean? Will I be cut? Will I make it to the next year? And again, like there's for Harold, it's sometimes there are cuts halfway through the season, but for the most part, it's once you're on, you're on for a year. And so the more you can treat it as an opportunity for learning and growth and, connection and just getting better, like look at it as a training ground, rather than like, I wonder if they're watching me tonight, which AD is here tonight, or, are they
Mm-hmm.
just like overthinking every little move that you've made. That can definitely, I think, trap people.
I think it's a difficult thing to understand when you're in it, especially that it's okay to be on a house team for 6 months.
Yeah, totally.
A few of us were lucky enough to be cast in Betty
Yeah.
in this first half of the year, and we've been told it's just for the 6 months. And so what's nice is that none of us feel we have to meet any evaluative bar, because I'm just like, yeah, there's we're definitely done in June.
Yeah.
So
And
like,
especially for this team and the caliber of talent on this team, like I was just so excited to get that group of people together and know that like this is for you as much as
yes.
it is for UCB. Like the talent is so high, and like I just want it to be an opportunity. I mean, as someone I did the first two seasons of Characters Welcome, which is what Betty was before, in New York, and then the first two seasons of it out here in LA as well. So I have a lot of experience doing the solo character thing. And I mean, yeah, so many of my favorite things came from just that room. And it was freeing to know that there was an end to it, that it wasn't like, I'm going to be on Betty hopefully for the next 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Also,
cool, this
I
is
can't.
6 months where I get to do this. Yeah.
By the way, I'm already like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. I can't
Yeah.
imagine doing this for another 6 months.
I
I will say
know.
that from my perspective, uh, I don't ever have to do a good Betty show for me to have gotten what is great about it. Because, by the way, I won't be
Yeah.
doing good Betty shows.
Perfect. And I will hold you to that.
just being in the room with the other cast and Andrew Knox, who's directing us, has been
Mm,
so fun. It's been
so
so just like actually I have never been in a situation where I pitched solo characters and other, seven other people that are really good at solo characters pitched ideas on them. So we have, which I guess should have been obvious to me, but we have essentially like a writer's room approach to helping each other with all of our things. And that has been great. And also I didn't really know the other people in the cast. So, and we already have I think we have this like vibe of, yeah, we're all just sort of like wandering nomads that ended up in this little 6 month period where we're going to work together. And so
well,
I
I'll
think
call it
maybe,
strategic.
yeah.
I'm very fond of all these wandering nomads, and I like, very purposefully was like, I really think, and I knew probably most of you didn't know each other, but I really do think that like that room for me was like the best thing I did in my time at UCB was on the character team, and it's
Mhm.
exactly that. It's like I would come in with the stupidest idea, like literally a voice or a face that I thought was funny. No game to the character, no premise, nothing. I would just like do this thing, and then people would be like, well, what if it's this, what if it's this? And by the end, like the room has written an incredible character, and this is like all
Yeah.
the stuff I used for like my SNL screen test was like just jokes that those people pitched back to me because they're so funny, and
Yeah.
it really is like a very cool, very specific type of writers room. So like when I was putting this team together, I was very excited for all of you to be able to have that experience, because I think so many of you are very, very experienced performers doing really, a lot of different stuff, have done a lot of different stuff, and it felt like this was something that some of these people have done a version of this, but all have the talent to do it, and will probably benefit quite a bit from just a room like that.
Yeah. Also, I think because of that vibe, because I mean, we all have other things going on. I don't feel any competition with each other. And I don't mean
At
that like,
all.
I don't feel any competition with these people. Uh,
I don't need to worry about these guys.
no, I don't feel and I have felt that over the years on
For
improv teams,
sure.
or, there's always a little bit of when you're doing a practice group and only like two of you get asked to be on a house team, or, um, and this doesn't have any of that, which has just been really nice. And also, I'm
I'm
the
so
oldest
glad to
person by
hear it.
like 10 years, so I'm getting my youth vibe.
Getting
I,
you get that youth juice, whatever
yeah.
it takes, find a way to get
Now
it.
I have the
Um,
Riz.
there
Um,
you go.
okay, two real quick things. One is, now there's sort of constellation of LA theaters, which is like UCB, Dynasty, Elysian, even the Clubhouse. Do you I mean, in some ways you're competitive with them, but there's also a, rising tide lifts all boats kind of idea as well. Um, do you? I'll just use my own example. I have my Scarlett Johansson show. I was going to do it at UCB, and I ended up doing it at Elysian. Does that annoy you? Are you like, fuck you, Chris, or whatever? Or
Oh God, no, no. The only reason it annoys me is because that was for me, that was felt like a mistake on my part, because there was like a rescheduling thing that was totally on me, and then I see how great that show is, and I'm like, that sucks that I fucked that up. Not because like you should absolutely be performing it wherever you want. I don't feel competitive with other theaters at all. I hope the owners don't hear me say that, but like I I think UCB is a very specific stage. It's a really, really amazing room. I think it's one of the best rooms when it's sold out,
Mhm.
because you get this thrust experience in this tiny space where it feels so alive. I think it's a really cool room to perform and play. And now that we have, the ability to stream, like it does open it up to a wider audience outside of LA. That said, like I was at Dynasty I did like a comedy panel 2 weeks ago, and I remembered when I did my show at Dynasty, and it's such a different experience. It's like a theater. It feels very
Mhm.
theatrical. It seats double the number of people. The vibe from the moment you enter that space through the green room, like everything about that is such a awesome experience. I just love Dynasty so much. Like their pre-show is so good. I was literally like watching it, and I was like, man, if only I had a theater that I could make this cool. And then I was like, oh boy, I gotta work on this.
You should, yeah, you should talk to
Like
someone who
I
has a
do.
connection.
Yeah, I really would wish that no. So like I just don't like. and there are shows that have left UCB. Like there's a show, Mamma Mia, but different. You know about it, but it's like a
Oh yeah,
parody.
yeah, yeah.
It's a Mamma Mia parody show, which I just think is so fun, and I love all the people doing it. And it was, started at UCB and then just outgrew the stage. Like they can fill more seats than 110, and the show itself is big, requires a bigger stage than UCB has to offer. So it moved to Dynasty, and I was like, totally get it. I completely understand this. I support it 100%. Now they're going to come back and also do some shows at UCB and maybe just do small, which is awesome. That's like the best version of it. But no, I don't feel competitive at all. I've also performed at Elysian. It's like the space itself offers a very different thing. So, I obviously want everyone who is great to feel like they would like to perform at UCB and are welcome to perform at UCB. But when it comes to like UCB versus whatever, fill in the blank, or like Largo, it's like, well, yeah, there's just no comparison if you're at a certain level. Like you can make 10 times the amount of money there because the ticket prices are so much higher and you can sell so many more seats. And so, yeah, and that was really a thing for me, even, when I first took this job, before there was kind of this, like all these different options in LA, I would always encourage people like, pitch your stuff other places. Like I came up through Groundlings. So like a lot of my training was through the Groundlings, and like, I was doing both and I didn't want to feel like I had to choose one.
Hmm.
So I always encourage people to do that. And I think my hope for the time, while I'm at UCB, is just to make sure that people who are great do feel like this can be a home for them if they would like for it to be.
Yeah. And also Dynasty and UCB are raising their live streaming game. The multi-camera edits on these videos is crazy. I got the archival
Yeah,
video from the Betty show last month, and I was like, this is like a
I
television
know.
show. What's going on?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to make it a place where we could pretty easily shoot something that actually looks and sounds pretty good. I think we still have some work to do on audio, and then I think we shot a special there last week, and they brought in 4 extra cameras. So I think if you're actually shooting, which you shot yours at Elysian, and obviously they had a whole camera crew and a lot more than the 3 cameras that we have at UCB, and you certainly need that for like a special or anything that would actually be sold or be attempting to sell to a streamer or a platform. But it is really cool that like with no cost at this point, aside from the live switcher, like we can do a live switch 3 camera, really pretty high quality version of an improv show, which did not exist before and is very fun to see come to life.
I mean, there might be a gap between that and TV, but I will say that the video I got from the Betty show is more than good enough to pitch to a regional theater, to festivals.
Yes.
So as an asset of, hey, I'm pitching you this show, and they're like, oh, do you have any video of it? This is going to be way beyond what people
Totally.
have
Oh
had.
my gosh. I remember just like trying to submit an iPhone video, and now
Right.
it's like, oh yeah, it's 3 camera edited. It looks and sounds really good. Like for the performers, it's a huge benefit, which is nice too.
Yeah.
Cause like, yeah, you might not make as much money at UCB, but if you can get 3 camera footage that's all yours for no cost, that that's worth something. Like you
Yeah.
usually have to pay $300 to $500 to do that, in the before times. So I'm happy we can offer that for performers for sure.
Uh, Christine, thank you so much for doing it, the interview and doing all the stuff you do. I also want to thank you for, talking about like, diversity and inclusion, which is, by the way, hot topic with the government right now.
Certainly is. Oh
They're,
boy, is
they're
it.
they're real advocates for it. Um,
Yeah, they're making no mistakes on this
um,
front.
I'll
Yeah.
be very candid that for several years, I would look at the cast photos of the New York ASCAT, and I would go, wow, it's like only white people in New York. New York is famously not a diverse city. Um,
Yeah, right? Of all the cities.
and Los Angeles too. And I emailed you earlier this year that was just like, I mean, which was like, hey, I'd love to do ASCAT, but also I was just very frankly, I was like, you don't have enough Asian people in these shows, and I these days I guess in our current climate, I'm just gonna be blunt to people and just say what I need from a situation. But I mean, but you were very
You should.
receptive to that and helped me get on ASCAT, which was very nice.
For sure. And even for that, like, I'd seen you obviously in so many shows, but I think as an AD, like you do just very naturally like categorize people, and you were always categorized as like musical improv, you know? And so even with the ASCAP piece, it's like it needed you emailing us to be like, hey, I would be really good for this. Just to be like, oh, for sure you would. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, have you join. But it is kind of just a part of this job is like, what does that person do? Oh, they're in this box. And I'm trying to take down the walls of these boxes because, you know, you want people to be able to cross all of these barriers, especially if they're super talented, you know?
Well, I also think it speaks to, and I'm still learning this, but I mean, I still just have this thing of like, oh, it's rude to ask, you know? Um, and I just don't think
The
this business
worst that can
runs that way.
happen, no, definitely not. And the worst that can happen is someone says no, you know,
Yeah.
like, that's it. And then you know who that person is, or you know what that
Or
institution
Christine
is, you know,
blacklists you for even
blacklist,
asking.
which I have secretly. So like you probably aren't feeling it yet, but like I have blacklisted you.
You're like shadow banning
Um,
me from the industry.
yeah, exactly. But I also invited you to be on a team. So yeah, you know, it's just, it's
Yeah.
complicated.
Um, Thank you so much. I'd love to do another one in a year, see how the theater's going, see what your plans are like. But
Awesome.
I think the recovery out of the pandemic has been, for me, for UCB, far beyond what I expected. I love going there and seeing that queue going out all the way to the corner to the Gelsons, and often, um, like it seems like a whole new generation of people has sort of discovered the theater, and
Yeah.
it's really fun to see them discover like almost the same vibe that it was before, which
Yeah,
is,
it's
I mean,
not,
almost the
that's what I
same.
feel like when I'm in that room. It's not too off. It's not too
Yeah,
different, you
it
know?
doesn't feel that off from like being under the Gristidis in Chelsea,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Yes.
Um,
Oh, those were the good old days. No,
yeah.
yes, I feel that same way, and I'm very grateful that we've been able to bring it back. And like, there should be a new generation, and it's always super exciting when we hear the answer via clap to like anyone here at the UCB for the first time, and like every show, it's like half the audience, or it feels that way, and that's very, very exciting to be like, oh, cool, we really are now accessing a new audience, you know?
Yeah, and they're seeing shows that, I saw O'Mary in New York. O'Mary is a great show. It's so funny. I paid
Yes.
over $200 to see O'Mary. And
When
I
did you
would
see
say,
it? Just recently?
no, I saw it a month before Cole left.
Okay.
Uh, the fact that in LA, I love that show. It was great, but a part of me was like, you can see a show in LA that's nearly as funny as this, or as funny, or funnier for $25.
For sure, it's so true. Well, and Cole obviously, you know, came up through UCB, did some stuff at UCB, and then, you know, I don't know if you know, do you know Chris Renfro?
Oh, I know. If I could go, I would love to go out and see Chris Renfro in it right now.
But that was so
Uh,
cool too to be like, what? Like you just got on Broadway and you're here, you know, on a Herald team and developing this new sketch show. And I mean, so I'm such a huge fan of them, but like it's very rare that you're like, oh yeah, someone from UCB Herald Night just got on the biggest Broadway show, you know. But it was
right.
very, you know, that's what that show is. It's a comedy, so you got to
Yeah,
get funny people, you
you gotta
know.
get funny people. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, Christine.
you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Thank you.